and we are meeting today with Dungeon Dad, celebrated YouTuber and dungeon master, who's going to be attending our spring event at D&D in a Castle, March 30th to April 3rd. We are having a little technical difficulty getting Dungeon Dad into our stream. He is just switching over to a new device to see if we can get him on the screen. So in the meantime, I think I'm going to ask our technical people to play a little reel to whet our appetite, play a little 1-minute video to show you a little bit of D&D in a Castle, to see a little bit of insight into what experience we are going to be offering next spring with Dungeon Dad, among many other celebrated dungeon masters. So if we can take it away to the 1-minute video, I'm hoping that our technical people have this under control and can do that, because I kind of just sprung this on them as a surprise. And hopefully when we come Aha! Yay! It worked. That was magical. That was magical.
Howdy.
We left without our guest and we returned with our guest. Amazing. How are you doing? This is everybody. Welcome to our DM Deep Dive with Dungeon Dad. Do I call you Dungeon Dad, or should I call you a different name?
You can call me Josiah in normal life.
Okay. I wasn't sure. Some people just like to be known by their brand, and that's helpful. So welcome, Josiah. We're so excited to have you, and we're so excited to have you on the stream. We're so excited to have you at D&D in a Castle. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting my stuff situated here. I had a few technical issues coming in, so I'm on my laptop. But yeah, I'm super stoked to be here. This is going to be so much fun.
Awesome. So what I'm hoping to start with is for you to tell us a little bit about what you plan to do with your guests at D&D in a Castle. You're coming April 30th to March 3rd next spring at Lumley Castle in the UK, which is a historic medieval fortress. And what are you planning? What are you planning, Josiah?
We got big plans in the works. I am kind of planning an expansion on a little game that I've been workshopping throughout the years, but basically we're going to be doing a game that takes place in a setting called The Vast in the Dark, which is system agnostic, but I've kind of adapted it to D&D to operate as sort of a domain of dread. For those of you who are horror fans, will know exactly what I'm talking about, or Barovia fans will know exactly what I'm talking about. But yeah, just kind of the idea being it's this sort of space separated from the rest of the multiverse that is totally severed off. And typically they're not places you want to be. And often these places tend to serve as sort of almost like a prison, like imprisoning someone or something. Either, I mean, this is where we kind of get into the weeds here, but the dark powers that be, are they good? Are they bad? Are they trying to keep these people separate because they're protecting everyone, or do they just take joy in the ironic punishment of it all? I'm not gonna pretend to be Chris Perkins up here establishing D&D canon, but yeah, it's just kind of this idea of a space separate from everything else. So it is very much still D&D. You know, there's still spells, magic, everything, all your weapons, abilities, all that stuff works the same way it does everywhere else. But some things don't work exactly the same way as they do everywhere else. and usually these kind of twists of fate and the way things are different tend to be related to whatever entity it is that is trapped within that domain as they kind of spread their influence. So in our adventure, the players are going to be there, and they're going to try to get out. And I hope they get out. I think that they can do it. I'm very confident that they'll be able to do it. But who knows? That remains to
So
be seen.
trapped in the domains of dread, trying to escape. Things are not what they seem all the time, or don't work the way you might expect them to. Is this going to be this is it's a little bit of a horror setting. Is it going to be a little bit of a more, are you the kind of DM that likes to lean into this sort of dark and horror and spooky and things like that? Or is it going to be more of a kind of a little more lighthearted, or some kind of juxtaposition of the two?
I think almost always you need a juxtaposition of the two because, for things to be truly kind of off-putting or horrific in a way that is fun, because it's kind of fun to be in those dark settings sometimes, you also need there to be moments of levity and I
think all D&D games have laughter, and like that's the point, is your character is in a dark place, but you're having fun with your friends, so that is always a thing.
Exactly. But, it's hard to be feeling filled with dread when you're sitting around a table playing D&D in a literal castle somewhere, right? Like, I tend to enjoy, like, I guess more darker thematic elements. In terms of how hard I lead into the horror, a lot of that depends on my group because, in order for a horror, I think, to really work as like a tabletop game, you have to be playing with a group who wants to like be scared. You know what I mean? And like, so I have groups that I've played with when we're playing, like Curse of Strahd is a great example because I think I've run that like 5 times now. And I've had groups who want to lean into that. And it's like, oh yeah, we get some like creepy bone chilling moments. And I've also had groups who just like enjoy the horror theming of it, but aren't trying to like kind of invest really hard in the like getting scared side. And that campaign has been just as fun. It just kind of feels a little different. So I think, matching the energy of the group is really important with all that stuff. But yeah, I really enjoy, like I said, the a lot of darker themes, but at the same time I also love like settings like Theros, where it's just so like Greek tragedy, I guess, just very high fantasy in a way where it's all satyrs and orchards. So
and you're kind of a monsters guy, yeah? Just based on monsters. Your content, are you do you expect that you'll be bringing in you'll be having a lot of fun with monsters in your game?
Yeah. I have so many plans for monsters in this game. Monsters are definitely my big thing. That was what got me into the game in the first place. Like I had the 3rd edition monster manual before I had ever played the game. Like, I was like, oh, this is cool. I wish I knew how any of these rules worked, but I like reading about these creatures, So yeah, in a game like this, all my games, I always try to bring something to the table. People who watch my content and are familiar with it in this specific campaign at D&D in a Castle might recognize a couple familiar faces that I've talked about on the channel throughout the years. But there's also a bunch of stuff that, see, this is the thing, because when I make content for my channel, a lot of these monsters are done like months in advance, and I just have this kind of stack of them, and I'm like, okay, cool, like which one do I want to really dive into next? So there's going to be some stuff that might end up on the channel eventually, but that is very much like, this is going to be next spring. So there'll be probably some stuff that might end up on the channel that summer that I'm going to bust out at the game table.
Yeah.
And also just some stuff that like, might not make for a great 45-minute deep dive video, but does make for a really interesting monster, as well as some original creations. So I think anyone who plays at my table who likes monsters is going to
be satisfied.
They're going to have a great time.
That's awesome. And in terms of D&D in a Castle and attending the event as a dungeon master, what made you want to come to this event and to DM at this event?
Oh, man. I mean, at the very most basic, it's D&D in a castle. You know what I mean? Like, castles are cool. D&D is cool. Playing D&D in a castle is very cool. So, I mean, like, I think we all get the appeal there, but I do think it's really neat to, I love DMing at events like this because everyone is there to play the game, right? Like, we're all there for a very specific reason. And it's also like, it's like condensation of all of the stuff that role-playing games have to offer, because
Mhm.
we're all just locked in this room together playing Dungeons and Dragons all day, and that's awesome. Like, you're so free of distraction, free of everything. And I mean, it's not to say that you can't get that sometimes, or even frequently, if you're really hardcore about it with like a home group. But you know, I don't know about you, but I do not have a castle where I can go in and be like, oh yes, let's go into this grand ballroom. Because even the room itself kind of puts you in that, like, you know, you're in a different place. You're immersed in the idea that you're kind of in this like medieval setting, which a lot of the times is what D&D tends to be. So I think that a big appeal of it to me is the immersive aspect of just kind of eliminating all distractions, being like, yeah, let's go on some crazy adventures and really see where this can take us, you know?
Have you gamed in this kind of format before, where you kind of go hard for 3 days,
Oh yeah.
locked in a room? Is that kind of your background? I know people come into D&D from different angles, different pathways. You know, some people come in by
Totally.
streaming, some people come in, you know, a Tuesday game that they have, you know, but being able to make the time. I mean, that's what the sort of draw and the foundation of sort of ethos of D&D in a Castle is how do we shut everything else out and just let people play. And not
Yes.
everybody gets that opportunity. So are you, is that your background, that kind of intense multi-day gaming kind of scenario?
I think that the vast majority of my gaming has been more, you know, we get together every week on Sunday for 4 hours. Like when I first got into D&D, that was very much the vibe, was, you know, Sunday from noon till 5, we just are going to play D&D with my primary group of friends who I learned the game with. We did that for like 7 years, which is crazy. And then, you know, people move, things happen, whatever. But in terms of doing this kind of thing, I've had the opportunity to do it a few times, and it's always so much fun. It's definitely not the way that I normally game, just because finding 3 or 4 days in a row to just do nothing but play D&D is tough. But the few times I have been able to do it, where it's like, you know, oh, so-and-so's in town, let's all just like get together this weekend, like Friday till Sunday night, like we're just gonna play some games and see what happens. That is a very special time when you can do that. So I am very much looking forward, because I think I've probably done it maybe 3 or 4 times. I remember one time we got together, we rented out an Airbnb because some friends were in town, with the intent of learning and playing Twilight Imperium. I don't know if you've ever played that game, but it's like one of the most complex like Axis and Allies adjacent kind of thing. And I think we got like halfway through reading the rules, and my friend Brent was just like, "You guys want to just play D&D?" We're like, "Yeah, sure." And then we just did that instead all weekend. So I've had some exposure to it, not enough to really say that it's kind of my typical experience, but it is definitely something that I love doing. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Are you always the DM? Are you the lifetime DM? Do you ever get to play?
I think it's like a 95-5 split for me. I am very, very often the DM. Which honestly, I don't even mind, because I know some people who kind of get stuck in that forever DM role are like, oh yeah, you know, I never get to play and always really excited to play. And I do really enjoy when I get to sit down to play for friends. Usually it's in the form of like a one shot for a friend's stream, usually like something charity related often,
Right.
is the case, which is always fun. And I do enjoy playing as a player, but I feel like I've been doing it for so long, and just with the way my brain works, like DMing is definitely my happy place. Like,
Right.
I and it's so funny because, you know, everyone always talks about how, oh, when you're DMing, it's so much more work, which is true. Like, you know, you're thinking about all the different monsters and the plot threads and like all the stuff that's going on. But I find when I play, it's like almost more pressure, because it's like you have one guy and like, you know, this is the guy,
Right.
you know what I mean? So I really like DMing because it allows me, when I have those kind of like little errant ideas, like, oh yeah, we can just have an NPC who does this, and then I don't have to commit to that for another 4 years.
Right.
Unless of course the party's like, you know, oh, we're adopting this person and taking them with us, and now that random goblin is the party mascot, which I know we all know happens. But
Yep.
yeah, so I think DMing is definitely my happy place. Not that I don't like playing, but yeah.
What is it about? So it's about, what is it about that you love about DMing? So you've mentioned like getting to like just follow your whims, or getting to do like a variety of things and get to like bring your ideas to life.
Yeah.
Is there any aspect of DMing that really appeals to you?
Yeah, so I mean, everything that you just mentioned is definitely true, but I think that for me, when it comes to DMing, I live for those moments when everything kind of comes together, I guess, for lack of a better term. It's tough to describe, but like, when you have a player and they give you their backstory and you find a way to like weave something from that backstory in, and then they have that reveal, like, oh my God, like, this is related to this. I know what's going on. Like, those moments are so huge. Or speaking more generally of just kind of like the plot at large, when the players get to have those moments of like realization. It's not even always just a big reveal, but just when they start to piece together what's happening and they come up with their own ideas about how they want to tackle problems and stuff. And that collaborative kind of energy that comes from when a story is really progressing and everyone is really feeling it. That stuff is the best. It's so good, especially when you posit. One of my favorite things to do is to posit a problem to my players that, like, in the back of my mind, I have a few ideas for how it might work out, but truly it is something that I'm like, there's a lot of ways you could take this, and the players just kind of lock in, convene, and come up with some wild plan about how they want to do this. And even if it's something conventional, like just being able to present those obstacles, watch them be overcome by your players in a way where they're really like engaging with your world, and you're allowing your world and your story to engage back with them. I think that is so cool. I think that is one of the things that tabletop games offers that basically no other experience can offer.
Mm.
And being able to be in the DM seat during those moments is extremely satisfying, at least to me. Like, I really love that. Yeah, I think that's really the thing that keeps me coming back every time. Because anytime I think of like an idea for a campaign or something, the first thing I think of is like, oh, how would they deal with this? How would they deal with this? So it's kind of, I guess, discovering those things together. Because when you leave just enough ambiguity, obviously you do all your prep and everything, but there's just enough space there to allow the players to kind of steer things. I always say, like, as a DM, you're building the car, but you're letting them drive it, right? So
Right.
getting to watch that happen in real time is very fun.
Yeah, I've heard a few different descriptions of that same kind of thing. You're building the tracks and they're driving the train, or yeah.
Yeah.
As a DM, what do you feel like is your kind of specialty? Like, in terms of, say, real world skill, say real world as if DMing isn't real world, but it also isn't.
Yeah.
Like we have some dungeon masters who are performers, who say voice actors or that kind of, or improvisers, that kind of thing, who really bring a sort of performance element and entertainment element. We have other DMs who say, for example, have an education background, who are teachers, and they bring a real strong facilitation and table management sort of skill. Are there particular things either with, and then we have also people who gravitate to different pillars of the game, for example, who
Right.
are really, these are the role play guys. This guy is high level combat, and that's what they, you're going to get to slay a lot of dragons. Is there elements of your game that particularly are your jam, your thing?
Yeah. I mean, like any dungeon master, you strive to excel at everything you can. But I think that in my specific case, the two things that I excel at the most, or that I try to bring the most to the table, first of which being just kind of like atmosphere. I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible, because
It's okay.
I don't need to
It's a
give you
deep
my
dive.
life
You can
story.
talk. It's fine.
I guess that literally is in the title.
That's
Yeah,
literally what we're here for.
Yeah, true. Okay, so yes, mark off the next couple hours, because we got a story to tell. But yeah, no, without giving you my whole life story, my background is in audio engineering and music composition, and a big part of what I used to do, and like what always attracted me to that, was it's kind of a boring thing, and it's one of those things that if it's done well, you don't even really notice that it's done well. But just the ambience and kind of background sound effects and that kind of thing. And going back to kind of the darker themes, horror thing, I love horror video games. And what makes or breaks a game like that a lot of the time can be the soundscapes and like just that kind of sense of atmosphere. So, you know, I do try to inject some sounds and like my knowledge in music. I often write music for my games, in fact, a lot of the times, which
Cool.
can be fun. But approaching it from that angle, like something that, you know, my mom always used to say to me was always approach every problem with the from the direction that you are most familiar with, like from a direction where you have like a good understanding. So with an understanding of kind of functioning ambience and trying to, you know, create immersion essentially is what it comes down to.
Mm.
I very much was a devil in the details kind of DM, and maybe even too much when I first started, but I've kind of learned to dial that in to a point where it's like, yeah, I'm going to give you enough so that you feel like maybe this could almost be a real place, but not so much that you feel like you're reading a Tolkien novel, you know. And not no shade on Tolkien, but like, you know, there's only so many ways you can describe a field. Anyways, yeah. So I think that that is something that I really put a lot of thought and care into, is trying to make places that feel all like almost believable if you allow yourself to believe in them. And the other thing that I really try to do, which is connected to that in a way, you know, we talked about, I'm a big monster guy. I love all the monsters. A big part of dealing with monsters is monstrous encounters, which sometimes is combat, sometimes not. But I try very hard to create encounters where, you know, you come across a monster and it's not just like, all right, roll initiative, let's do combat, see how it goes. And like, you know, sometimes that happens, but a lot of the time I try to create situations where maybe you solve it without combat or with combat, but like in a clever way by like using the environment. Because again, these monsters don't just exist in like a liminal space and they pop in when we need them and then, oh, they're dead, get your treasure, and they leave. Like, they live in these areas, right? So for example, a monster that I'm very fond of that might make an appearance in this game, depending on where the players go and what happens, is a creature called an Odopi. An Odopi is basically like a 75-foot round tumbleweed made out of arms. They're very unsettling and creepy and weird, and they have eyeballs in the center of their palms, and they have like a language that's built out of clapping, and that's how they communicate with each other. So it's like kind of silly, but also kind of horrific in a way. And I always think it's interesting to be like, okay, well, this creature's living in these ruins. Like, how do they interact with their environment, and how does the environment interact with them? So, you know, if you get in combat with this monster, it's not just going to be in a hallway. Like, it will have spent time burrowing tunnels in the area. It knows where to go. So it's not going to just sit there and fight and either it kills you or you kill it. If it starts to get on the back foot, it's going to retreat into these tunnels and then pop out maybe a few minutes later. You know, really just encounters where the monsters, where the world matters.
Right.
And, you know, sometimes a group of bandits accosts you on the road, and that is what it is. There's only so much.
Yeah. There's only so much strategy and fight bandits.
Exactly. And like, you know, those encounters are important to happen as well. Like, that stuff matters. But when it comes to the big monster encounters and stuff like that, I really like even putting things in the game world as well that the players might interact with if they do so before encountering this monster. Maybe even after that, will give them kind of like an alternate routes of how they might want to deal with that. Either finding something that can more quickly defeat the monster, or something that it wants that they can like start a bargaining process. Like, there's all kinds of ways we could spin out about this all day. But yeah, I think that my biggest strength comes in immersion and tying that into encounters to make encounters feel like they really matter, and also like this thing that you are engaging with has a life outside of rolling initiative. And I can do an okay goblin voice. So those are my three.
So it sounds like you like world building, making it real, immersion. I mean, this sounds like the ideal game for D&D in a castle, because that's what is sort of, we're trying to not break that sort of suspended disbelief
Totally.
in a way by this immersive setting, and also the fact that there's no real life intruding. There's no, it's a private, we have the whole castle to ourselves, and everybody there is there for the D&D. So you know, there's no breaking out of the D&D experience. Do you have any thoughts about or ideas about using the castle itself in your game?
I've been thinking about that literally since we first met and you know, agreed to do all this. And I've got a few ideas. I think it's partially going to depend on like what type of room I end up in, like what the actual space looks like. But I yeah, I have a few ideas in terms of incorporating. This is always a fun thing when you get to do this, but kind of incorporating the castle potentially as a location like within the game. Even maybe that's where we start out, because I mean I won't get too heavily into this, but we've established, this campaign that I'm going to run is going to take place in this kind of otherworldly domain of dread. And a big part of this game is the players are not going to necessarily understand exactly how they got there. One of the kind of themes that is going to be popping up now and then is going to be the idea of memories. And this is a place where the longer you stay here, the kind of more of yourself starts to erode over time. So there is somewhat of a ticking clock element where, there are people who have been here maybe hundreds of years and like they don't really remember their name or anything anymore. And they're just kind of still functioning, but, it starts to take its toll. So one of the big things is that the players are not going to remember how they got here. And that's going to be the first step in uncovering the mystery of how to get out. Because, once you figure out that, well, now we have something we can potentially work off of. But yeah, I really like the idea of having the castle itself be something of a stronghold that maybe the players find themselves venturing in before they go into this mysterious new world. And I mean, again, once I kind of get a better feel for the space itself, we'll see what else happens. But I'm a big fan of physical real world elements, whether we're talking handouts or lighting or music or fog, and as well as like the actual miniatures and stuff themselves and that kind of stuff on the table. I love that stuff. And that is why consistently with my own home games, because I mean, doing that stuff every week at your home game, a little tricky if you don't have a dedicated space. But every year, usually around Halloween, like we'll do like an Oktoberfest game.
Oh, fun.
Pull out all the stops. And that is so much fun because, yeah, our living room transforms into a musty tavern somewhere. So, I basically, however much you're willing to let me get away with, I will definitely come up with different.
Oh, we're definitely, that's, I started this company with my brother, Cameron, and we always say Cam's the D&D and I'm the castles. That's our kind of partnership. And so a lot of the things you're saying are really resonating with me. I like to facilitate, the experience for people. I'm facilitating their vacation experience, their event experience. And so I'm like the DM of the whole castle experience. And also, I'm also a Halloween kid. So grown up, I make immersive Halloween worlds. That's what I do on my front lawn at Halloween. So I'm really hearing that. It sounds like you're definitely not a theater of the mind guy, if I can make that.
Yeah.
So if you're looking up stuff and feel like you're really in it, and you've got the tangibles and the visuals and the audio and the everything that your real body is in there. I do know some people like to game with their imagination and that kind of thing. But it sounds like you're more in the let's create it here in the real world.
Yeah, this is like kind of a funny story actually, but I used to very much be a theater of the mind, especially starting out primarily. I mean, we had this is twofold. One, because all miniatures and stuff gets expensive, and when you're in high school, you don't have a lot of extra money, so we were using
gummy bears. Here we go.
Yeah, like literally, yes. Everyone has their story using like snacks as goblins, or we're busting out Monopoly. It's like, oh yeah, my third level fighter is the car. Like whatever. You do what you got to do. And I definitely did do theater of the mind, not necessarily because I was like, this is the way to play the game, but more so just because that was what I had access to at the time. And, I grew my collection over the years as time went on. But even then, I primarily did a lot of theater of the mind just because it was slightly less prep. And I had a player one day, one of my good friends, her and I have been friends for like 20 years. And we had finished up a game, and she said something to the effect of like, wow, when you guys are talking about like our past game sessions, it's always so interesting to me you always recall them like as if you were there. And it's like, yeah, well, you just like imagine like, what was happening, whatever. She's like, I don't have that. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, when I think about this, like I remember everything happening, but like I remember us sitting around the table and like this, funnily enough, sent her down this whole rabbit hole. And I cannot remember specifically what the condition is, but she has that thing where when people have difficulty like imagining abstracts, basically, it's one of those things like the demonstration people often give is imagine an apple rolling off a table. Okay, what color is the apple? How big is it? What does the table look like? Like, you create all this stuff. She just like doesn't do that. She's just like, I understand the concept of an apple rolling off a table, but there's no like fantasy. There's no like wow. And I was like, oh wow, that sucks. That you are kind of missing out on part of this experience. So that was when I started using more miniatures and stuff, actually, because I was like, do you think it would be helpful if we had more terrain? I was like, yes. I was like, okay, cool. So we pulled some of our resources together, got some terrain, and started using more miniatures, more like involved terrain and stuff like that. And after doing that for a little, she was like, this is a lot better. Like that really helped her kind of feel that same level of immersion because there was a physical thing she could look at and be like, oh yeah, like I have a better understanding of where we all are and what's happening. It's so much less abstract. So ever since then, I mean, that is obviously a very uncommon situation, but that has kind of just been something in the back of my mind. So anytime I'm running games, especially for strangers, because I never know how people are going to be most engaged, the people who are just engaged by theater of the mind, that's great. Like, they're going to be engaged no matter what. But for folks who find the extra stuff more helpful, then it's like, I mean, hell yeah, man. Like, it's here too, so that we can all kind of try to pull away the best time we can from this. So
cool. How did you end up in D&D? What is your backstory?
So my backstory with D&D was basically, it's so funny. It's like a really random chance, honestly. When I was in high school, I knew D&D existed because, I have always been into board games and like tabletop games and also like, video games, RPGs, fantasy, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. So, it really seemed like it was weird that I wasn't into D&D. It honestly, like, I checked all the other boxes. Like, the Venn diagram was basically a circle, And I, essentially, one day, a friend of mine was talking about it. And I knew of D&D. And I tried to watch it, actually, because I was like, I want to understand how this works. And I think it was maybe an Acquisitions Incorporated stream at like a really at a convention like a long time ago, because this is going like 2010, 2011. I don't even remember, but it was a D&D stream at a convention. I was like, oh, this seems really cool, but I don't really get it. And a friend of mine, I brought it up with him because I knew he played, and he was like, oh yeah, and he was like, tell me about it. He's like, hey, we were at a birthday party, and he was like, our DM is here if you want to talk to him. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I sat and talked to him for like a couple of hours. He was like, yeah, why don't you just like come next time? We'll make a character and you can try it out. And I was like, awesome. So I did that, and instantly I was like, cool, this is just my thing now. Like, this is just what I do. We were playing 3rd edition. And because that was the other thing too, and part of this kind of interest in Dungeons and Dragons, I had looked and saw the monster manual. I was like, okay, well, that's obviously the first book you should buy. It's not. This is the only book that doesn't tell you how to run the game or play the game. It just has.
It's not usually the first, but I love it.
It's the exact wrong choice to make. But yeah, so I was like, yeah, I have the monster manual. He was like, why? And I was like, oh, I just thought it was like cool. And he was like, all right, so that you don't need that book. He's like, you don't really need the Dungeon Master's Guide. He's like, I have a player's handbook. I'll let you borrow it. And yeah, I went a couple hours early, and him and I sat and had a little sit down where I made my Aarakocra monk, and whose name was Caldith. Didn't know what I was doing, and then just kind of jumped in with this group of friends while they were on this adventure. And then I ended up playing in that campaign for like 4.5 years, 5 years. That campaign, we went level 1 to like 22, 23-ish, because this was back in the 3rd edition days. And then when that campaign finished up, I think it would have been probably around 2015. It was right around the time when like 5th edition was brand new, basically. And then we were like, oh, okay, cool. Do we want to try the new system? Do we want to just do another 3rd edition game? And that was when we decided to jump over and start playing 5e. But yeah, so like very just kind of the stars aligned, random chance, right place, right time, talk to a friend, and then was inducted for life, which was really funny about that too, because my first year of college, right after that, or 2 years after that, I guess, I still was very much learning the game. And all my roommates wanted to play because they knew that I was like doing this thing. And they were like, oh yeah, you can DM for us because you know how it works. I was like, buddy, I kind of know how a 7th level monk works. Like, I don't really, so that was a campaign that also went for quite some time, which when I look back on is comedic in how wild some of the things I did were. But that's how you learn the game. That's what I always tell people, if you want to learn, just do it. And
just do it.
Mess up the rules and all this stuff, but you will have a good time. And at the end of the day,
my sister DM'd us our first game. Me, my brother Cam that I run this with, and our older sister who's not involved. She DM'd our first game at I think the age of 9.
Yeah.
So, you can do it. Like
totally.
you're gonna get better, but you can do it. Like you can also just kind of make it up if nobody knows any better.
Totally,
I mean, at D&D in a castle, people do know better, but a lot of the time. Although, we'd also have newcomers and, but
for sure.
Definitely is something anybody can jump into. They just have to want to do it, really.
Totally.
Yeah, and there are levels of, skill and knowledge and so on from there. So what kind of player do you think is going to enjoy your game the most? And is there any kind of player you think, maybe you should pick someone else's game?
I think the people who will enjoy my campaign the most are people who really want to, I guess, solve a mystery. And, I'm definitely not the type of DM who, we're trying to solve something and I'm going to sit there and let you fumble around for 4 hours because you didn't find the specific thing under a floorboard in this guy's house or whatever, But I do think that players who kind of enjoy the idea of that ticking clock element, and it's like, sort of high stakes, but also there is a mystery to be solved and you very much have all the tools you need. You just have to figure out how to put them together in what order to do so. And people who are just monster enthusiasts. Those people always have my heart. I think anyone who that sounds appealing to is going to have an amazing time. And in terms of people who, this might not be for them, I would say I do really enjoy the role play aspect of D&D and like kind of getting into character and giving the players NPCs to interact with. But I also don't have a background in theater. So if you want someone who can do a lot of different, I got like 4 voices locked in and they're good. But, beyond that, if you want someone who is going to be able to bust out their, previous theater experience, I might not be exactly what you're looking for. And I know there are other people who are attending during this time slot who are exactly what
go
you're
play in Mark Mears' game if you want to be entertained by an actor.
Oh my God, dude. Yes. Like, absolutely. Like and it's not to say that like, I don't get into it because I do.
We all do. But, I think there's a principle that anything that tries to be for everybody is going to be for nobody. So it's important to acknowledge like this is the game for this person, and we have a broad array of DMs. So we want everyone to have a great game, and we so recognizing like I'm this kind of DM, I'm not that kind of DM. This is the kind of game, and if you're looking for that, that's what you're going to get here. That's what we try to do, and with our DMs, all our DMs at the castle, we try to encourage them to give their game. Because we don't want to have like one sort of homogenous D&D in a castle type game. We want to have options for everyone. So, but I love your focus on immersion. I think that sounds like so much fun. And definitely, you're probably the only DM I've talked to who started with the monster manual. I mean, maybe there are others. I just don't know that I've heard that before.
It's definitely unconventional for sure, but like, it is what it is.
That's great. And murder mystery, mystery, maybe it's not a murder mystery, but
there might be some murders.
Mystery and intrigue. I love that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Great. So we're reaching the end of our time. I'm going to ask you to take us out with an invitation to the people, and invite them to come to your game March 30th to April 3rd of the dates at Lumley Castle, and dindianacastle.com is where to go to find all of that. And you can find a write-up about our guest today, and you can find a write-up about his campaign and information about the event. And if you have any questions, there's a chat on there. There's real people behind that chat, and you can email us, and we're real humans that respond. So feel free to ask us anything and for more information. But I'm going to pass it over to you to take us out with an invitation to your game at Indiana Castle next spring.
Yeah, and I mean, for those of you who have seen all of this or have watched all of this, forgive me for retreading, but if you're the type of person who likes the idea of being in a strange, mysterious place where nothing is the way that it should be, but there's lots of things that are also vaguely familiar in an uncool way, in an off-putting way, and you want to crack into that and figure out the mysteries of this world along with how you got there in the first place and maybe even how to escape such a place, you are cordially invited to plunge feet first into the vast and the dark with myself and your fellow adventurers and put those problem-solving skills to the test and try to remember your name by the end of the weekend. And I have the utmost faith that you can do it. If you're watching this right now and you're even slightly intrigued, you should allow yourself the opportunity, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I hope I will see you there.
Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you at the castle.
Yeah, we'll see you then.